How do you scale small scale? It's not convincing Nestle, Pepsi to adopt better practices, because even if they did, they're always going to be at the industrious level. The industrious level doesn't allow for community, for people, for connection. We're not trying to mass produce one way because the ecology doesn't work that way and community doesn't work that way. We are trying to multiply the small initiatives, the small farms, so that a number of small ecological farms are feeding communities. And if you look at all the reports from the UN, the FAO, they all say the same thing. Small farms across the world are the food system that's feeding communities. The forest floor is powerful in the fact that the roots are all touching, connecting, talking to one another. And that tall standing tree in itself might look very mighty, but it's so much more powerful when it has its neighbor and its neighbor and its neighbor in a forest that's there to protect and create the canopy. Welcome to the Market Gardener Podcast, where we believe that small-scale farming is changing the world. Join us for insightful conversations with people who are working to build a better future. A future with less mass production and more production by the masses. The revolution is in the field. Let's get digging. This podcast is proudly supported by Tessier Greenhouses. If you've been enjoying the show so far, make sure to hit the subscribe button. It's a small thing to do, but for us, it means the world. The subscribe button allows us to keep promoting the show. It allows us to keep inviting new guests, more diverse guests, to have these enlightened conversations. Let's keep these conversations going. Help us by subscribing to the channel. All right, everyone, welcome to this episode of the podcast. Today, I'm without Chris. We all need vacations, and we just had an amazing week last week at the Canopy retreat program that we have initiated last year at the Market Gardener Institute, and that was held here at the Old Mill in Quebec, Canada. And so today what I want to do is reflect on some of that, but I also want to invite you all into my thought process about how I see the movement moving forward. And I think we're going to title this session, How Do You Scale Small Scale? Because that's really what I believe in. But I just want to circle back to Canopy. Canopy is a leadership program that we kickstarted last year, and this was the second edition. We had 15 growers and consultants and people from different expertise coming down. We were together for 3 nights, 4 days. We had amazing guest lecturers. We had Kish Johnston from Advancing Eco-Agriculture. You've perhaps have heard about Kish on another episode of the podcast. He was talking about plant-positive approach to agronomy, how to deal with pests through nutrition. It's just like super, super informative, powerful stuff. We also had Benjamin Ferrer, which was also on a previous episode of the podcast, talking about design, talking about how permaculture still today can be so relevant into understanding farms from a whole process point of view. Just talking about also how to flow between ourselves, how design can also create connections between ourselves. We had Chloe Trudeau, who I know very well, with whom I've started FQT Farm almost 10 years ago. She talked about team management, how to organize the folks, how to have these strategies that are in place to really spearhead team spirit and make sure that you have a crew that's on board for 100% all of the time. So there's a lot of tricks and tips that went to that. Then there was the leadership aspect of the conference. Beautiful moments. We had 3 beautiful meals together. One of them was here at the Old Mill. And we also had a very special guest. I'm not going to cry over this, but it was very emotional for me because Eliot Coleman, with his beautiful wife, Barbara, they came down and they spent a few days with us all. listening to what we were doing. And also, we recorded a podcast with Eliot because he's going to publish a new book in November. And he had a lot to say about where the movement was in the 60s and the 70s, but also about where it stands now. And he had a lot to share about no-till, how he believes that that's not the answer, how regenerative is interesting, but to be aware that, there's always a fight to push down and push back organic, because organic is without any herbicides. So he talked to us about that. He talked to us about his library. He has thousands and thousands and thousands of books, old books from the 20s, from the 30s, from the 1800s on organic farming. And he was really passionate about perhaps us all leaning into these old books to rediscover some of the founding principles, some of the process. His talk was entitled Processes Over Products. And, talked in lengths about crop rotation, about green manure, cover crops. But he talked about being self-sufficient in terms of the inputs that you're putting in your farm, and how these farms are really autonomous, and these farms should be what we're all aiming for. So really delightful conversation. I'm not sure that when we'll be releasing this edition of the podcast, if the one with Eliot Coleman will be out, but and this is totally something that we all need to be listening to. Eliot is, I think, 87, if I understood correctly. Him and Barbara was the first to dance on the dance floor. They danced for a few hours Thursday night. Still alive, still kicking, still passionate. We had an amazing meal together. We drank some beautiful wines. We had a good time. And, for some of you that perhaps don't know this, Eliot is my mentor, and he was my biggest influence in my early years in farming, and he's the one that introduced me to the owner of FQT Farm. So that's how I got into FQT, the FQT project. And for him to come down and to just kind of pass on his wisdom was a really special moment. So anyway, Canopy, really beautiful time. If you are listening to this and feel inspired by some of this, we'll have another retreat next year. It's a full year in the waiting, but the Canopy program is there to help the leaders of today connect between themselves. Because what happens is that we're all doing amazing work in our own fields. Some of the folks have been farmers for many, many, many years. Now they're doing more structural work, either in agronomy, either in consulting, either in teaching. But we all kind of feel the same. It's kind of lonesome when you have, this will to make an impact, to change, but you're not super well connected with other people that are just like you. Their goal, their mission, they wake up in the morning to make a difference. And there's a lot of us out there that are doing this. And just to bring these folks together, to have them meet one another and to give them more tools in their toolbox for them to be, better leaders that, just perhaps reaffirming that this is their role and they should feel proud of that, and that there's a network that's there to support them. And it's a global network, which is really what's interesting, because I've had the opportunity to travel all around the world talking about my farm and bringing my message of market gardening everywhere. And one of the things that I've seen is that we're all the same. Whether I'm giving a 2-day workshop to growers in Hungary or in Croatia or in Pennsylvania or in Sherbrooke, Quebec, or in Germany, we're all the same. Like, I feel totally connected and related to the folks that I'm with, and I think it's the same for them. We share the same passion. We share, everyone wakes up Saturday morning at 4:30 to load up the pickup and drive to the farmer's market with their vegetables. Everyone understands how to set up a CSA and what it's involved, growing vegetables in the field and organizing all of this. We end up always following the same kind of processes. So we're much more alike, even with all the cultural differences. And For me, at this point in my farming career, what's important is to flip back what I've what I've learned and what I've gained in terms of acknowledgement. I feel very fortunate to have had success in my farm, with the success that I've had in my book, The Market Gardener, with FQT Farm, with Heirloom, with all the projects, with the Old Mill that just was awarded a Green Star by Michelin. All these projects, I'm very proud of them, but for me, it's really about flipping it back so that others will do the same, so that they can start their small organic farms, so that they can start their teaching farms, so that they can open their own farm-to-table restaurant to build community, so that Heirloom is connected to other pieces of a stacking software that we all need if we're going to be successful organic small-scale farmers. And the Market Gardener Institute, the mission is to help spread that and to really make sure that we are diligent in connecting the people that need to be talking to one another, because if we want to have impact, it's not going to be through a guru. It's not going to be it's a movement. And I've known this for as long as I've been a part of this, although I get a lot of attention and, I feel fortunate about this, but I also feel the responsibility. And so for me to be able to make sure that others rise, others stand up, that we are all in this together is really key. And this brings me back to the original question when we started this conversation is scaling small scale. If you look at what our movement is about, when I got into farming, sustainable farming was kind of the alternative, if I could say that. And that was a long time ago. It was sustainable farming versus chemical farming that was obviously depleting soil from the Green Revolution. And then organic farming came into play. And that was also something where, okay, we're not using chemicals, we're not using herbicides, pesticides, and we're not using fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers. We're farming without all of this, and that was that's how I got into farming. It was interesting. It was a challenge, learning how to fertilize organically, learning how to crop rotate, learning how to use green manure, learning how to be gentle with the soil. But let's be real. The last 20 years, the organic movement that was started in the 30s and the 40s, that people that were opposing chemical farming, it grew into an industry. And if you walk into Whole Foods today in the US, man, you'll be blown away by organic this, organic that, organics. But it's it kind of lost a little bit of what it was originally about, and it has become about replacing synthetic fertilizers with fertilizers that are approved by the USDA, let's say in the US, and chemicals that are perhaps a little bit more natural, but still they're chemicals, and they're built and created by the same companies, Syngenta, Monsanto, Bayer's. These are the same companies that are creating these quote natural pesticides. And so the organic movement became something else, and then regenerative became quite popular. I think it's a lot more popular than organic now. And in this podcast, if you've been listening, we're always kind of questioning this word, how it became so popular, who's behind it, what's the implication of using this word? Is it regenerative with herbicides? And that's what the whole no-till movement is about. And that's becoming clearer and clearer to me, at least. And I do feel that some of us in our movement need to kind of step away from that word, because it's heavily loaded by influence of these big companies that really are pushing no-till so that herbicides will be used to clear the soil when we're flipping from one crop to the other. So you can look into that, but I'm just kind of bringing everyone down, because then there's small scale. And that's where, for me, it becomes really interesting, because We're not trying to mass produce one way because the ecology doesn't work that way and community doesn't work that way. We're trying to bring the local food system at the scale of community. And we are trying to multiply the small initiatives, the small farms, so that a number of small ecological farms are feeding communities instead of feeding a market, a regional market, an international market, or a market like the US, where you need farms that are so huge that it's out of scale and it's non-ecological anymore. Okay? So that's really, in my opinion, the heart of the matter is scale. So regen, okay. Regen organic, better. Small scale regen organic. For me, that's really where it is. This podcast is proudly supported by Tessier Greenhouses. Tessier has always been one of my top choices for greenhouses and tunnels. For over 45 years, they've been manufacturing high quality and incredibly strong structures right here in North America. Their products can withstand the heavy snow loads we faced here in the Northeast, and their prices are among the best in the market. Tessier offers excellent service and expertise, always ready to help with customized solutions. I particularly appreciate their commitment to innovation and their willingness to listen to the needs of growers. At the Old Mill, we use several of their Gothic Caterpillar tunnels and micro tunnel for season extension, and I'm always impressed with their design and build quality. Without companies like Tessier, food sovereignty just wouldn't be possible. So thank you, Tessier, for helping us growers feed our community year-round. You guys rock.
Use promo code MGI10 for 10% off your first order and free shipping in select regions.
Before we continue, friends, I want to tell you about New Society Publishers. New Society is not your average publisher. Their focus is on positive impact. Their books cover important issues like climate action, food justice, and sustainable farming, and they practice what they preach. They are a certified B Corporation, certified carbon neutral, and they print on recycled paper. They published my first book, The Market Gardener, which has brought thousands of people to the world of small-scale farming. And with their extensive collections of books, including popular titles like The Seed Farmer from my good friend Dan Brisebois, or Coppice Agroforestry, you too can learn to garden, farm, or live a greener life. Hop over to newsociety.com, check out their books, and use the promo code MARKET25 for 25% off on all of their books. This is a sweet deal, friends. New Society Publishers, cultivating change one page at a time. And then market gardening is what we're doing, what I'm teaching, and what I've been doing for 20 years. It's a super smart way to get into farming. And it's a super clever way to establish yourself in the community and make it work. Just under a few years, you can have a profitable small farm. And then, you're in that space. And that's really what we're teaching at the Market Gardener Institute. But all of these spheres of influence, for me, they're important to kind of be thinking about them. And the question is always the same. Okay, small scale. The logo of Growers & Co., another company that I'm a part of, is small scale farming is changing the world. But small scale farming is also feeding the world right now. And if you look at all the reports from the UN, the FAO, they all say the same thing. And small farms across the world are the food system that's feeding communities. It's just like in the modern, progressive, I hate that word. It's really not the right word, but economies where we've tried to industrialize agriculture to the max. And, that system is in bed with the stock markets and with so many implications. And so we're not really trying to dismantle that. We're trying to substitute it by local farms, okay? It's a more beautiful way to do it, and it's a more empowering way to do it. Instead of fighting against the system, let's just replace it. Let's just have these farms that are there. Let's just create community hubs. Let's just create community centers where this food is served. Let's just create market opportunities for these farms to be able to operate, be profitable, to multiply. And that's really where my thinking is. How do we feed communities by a bunch of farms? And how do we scale that? How do we scale small scale? I don't have the answer to that. I'm part of a group of people that are thinking about these things. And we have the Market Gardener Institute that's deeply involved in this thinking and in doing, because we are training people. We are opening opportunities for people consultant. We are opening opportunities for farm design. We're opening opportunities for all the different layers that these small farms need to be productive and profitable. We're a support group there. But we also have this mission of multiplying these number of farms. Our goal at the Market Gardener Institute is to be directly involved with establishing more than 100,000 farms across the world. And we want to connect with more than 3 million farm supporters. Okay, so that's the oath that we have at the Market Gardener Institute. And that, for me, is one way of making sure that that's a clear, concise direction of all the actions that we're taking here. They're going towards that goal. But even if we get to that goal ourselves, even if myself, I'm directly involved with 100,000 farms, that's not enough to make a dent. Like, the impact of that will be interesting, and it's going to be the right move forward, but it's not sufficient. So we need to have this initiative also multiplied. We need to have other groups that are doing the same thing, other groups that are empowering small farms, other groups that are designing farms for the better, other groups that are creating market opportunities for small farms, other groups that are promoting, small-scale farming as a lifestyle and as a beautiful way to start a career in something that's relevant. So it's an ecosystem. And one of the most interesting aspects of my work now, and what gets me up in the morning, is discovering pieces of the puzzle. Discovering that Benjamin Ferrer is doing this beautiful work, in California. And discovering that these folks are doing amazing work down there, connecting with some folks that had a farm for 12 years and that are now ready to start a farm school, and helping them in the best way I can. And I do find that that's where I'm at the moment, and obviously not everyone's at the same level. Some people are starting farms, and that's perfect. We need that. Some people are starting farmers market. That's what we need. But I just feel that it's so crystal clear what the objective is. And the objective is to multiply this movement. And it's not to scale the food system. It's not convincing Nestle, Pepsi, to adopt better practices. Because even if they did, that doesn't solve much of it. Because these farms, because of the scale aspect, in my opinion, they're not resilient. And they're always going to be at the level, at the industrious level. The industrious level doesn't allow for community, for people, for connection. These are processes that are, in my opinion, not what food is about. I don't think it would be a good idea to decentralize, car manufacturing, because a car is a car. But food is different. Food is not just what we put in our mouth. Food is about energy. Food is about how this was grown, is about how the soil was cared for. And there's energy that goes into all of that, and that's what we put in our bodies. And that's how we relate to one another. And that's why these farm-to-table restaurants are important, because people understand that the food, where it comes from the terroir, from the locality, comes from a certain vibrancy, comes from a certain template, a DNA, which makes us. And then we're eating this food together at a table in celebration. All of this, I'm not sure that PepsiCo is really interested in that kind of connection. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Belle Serre Inc. Belle Serre is a professional team specializing in the installation, maintenance, and repair of greenhouses and dome all across Quebec and Ontario. Whether you need help building a greenhouse that's too hard to tackle on your own or just replacing your plastic, the Belle Serre team has got you covered. I've worked with them on my last project, and I can tell you, friends, they're trustworthy, hardworking, skilled, and always attentive to their client. They're a bunch of young lads that are eager to make a difference. I really, really like them, and you can reach them on Facebook or Instagram, or simply by giving them a call. Yes, the phone still works today. 819-816-4620. A big thank to the team from Belle Serre for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. You guys are truly a great team, and our agricultural community is lucky to have you. And so I do feel that the revolution and the most radical approach is this idea of scaling the small scale and of multiplying these initiatives so that we're creating community through fine food, through good food, and through ecology. Okay, ecology is really key here, because ecology is not just something that we, checkmark. Ecology is a service. Ecology is powerful. Harnessing the power of ecology on our farms, in our community, is the right way, is the smart way to move forward. It's not just technology. Okay? Technology is interesting, but there's a catch-22 in technology. I think we can all feel this through our phones, how we're being, phones just are taking over our lives. Ecology is something else. And social ecology, which is a word that was used in the 80s and the 90s, that's something that I grew really fond of when I was a younger farmer, reading about social ecology, is also something that is really powerful and that we need to perhaps tap into. So, again, I guess today what I want to share with you all is where my thought process is, what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking big picture. And as you've probably noticed, this podcast is kind of digging into this a little bit, with different people coming in with different answers. Perhaps some people, we're also inviting people that are challenging Chris and I on this thought, the local food system being the champion system. But I don't have the answers to that. But I do feel that the best way to move forward is to bring a lot of these people that are working on these issues together and to create a strong web. The forest floor is powerful in the fact that the roots are all touching, connecting, talking to one another. And that tall standing tree in itself might look very mighty, but it's so much more powerful when it has its neighbor and its neighbor and its neighbor in a forest that's there to protect and create the canopy, which ultimately is what will save us in the age of global warming and climate change. So, I don't know what your thoughts are onto this. I would love to have a conversation with you. At this point, the best way is to write, comment. Do you think I'm totally off? Do you think I'm short-sighted on certain things? Because I read it a lot. Yes, small scale, that's great, but you can't make money in farming. Small farms are not the future. Blah, blah, blah. I read these things often, but I'm never convinced by the arguments that are being forwarded to me. I really ain't. And on the contrary, what I've seen and what I've observed is that small farms, when they multiply in one area, it creates a nucleus and it changes the community for the better. And the economy gets changed. And it's just about making sure that these areas are self-preserving and that there's consciousness with the food eaters that come around that to make sure that it all works and lubricates together well. So, I don't want to pigeonhole myself in this thinking. This is where I'm at now. I'm thinking about how to scale small scale. I'm thinking that small is beautiful. I'm thinking that small farms that are autonomous, that have human size shapes, that have good permaculture designs around them, that have appropriate technology made for human scale farming, and that have good markets that don't require you to grow volumes because you're not wholesaling, you're direct selling or semi-direct selling. You're getting most of the benefit of the sale on you're keeping it onto the farm. And this is nothing new under the sun, but I do feel that that's where it's at. And I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. These are important conversations, and we're really excited to have them and to share them with everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to it, download the episodes, and please rate them. It makes a difference for us. We want to know what you think about these conversations. They're important. Check out the work that we do at the Market Gardener Institute. You can check out our website, themarketgardener.com. Our mission is to multiply the number of small ecological farms around the world. And we do this by offering training, online courses to new aspiring farmers, but also to seasoned growers. We're helping them take it to the next level. So you can check out the work that we do. You can follow us on social media. You can sign up to our newsletter to get a lot of freebies about gardening, farming, but also about how small-scale farming is changing the world. And that's really what we're all about, and that's really what this is all about. So again, thank you for tuning in. Super excited that you guys are on board. We are changing the world.